Hey there, how you doing? Nice to see ya. You know what? You're looking awfully hungry today, which is good because we're making bagels. It's my first time ever making bagels, and it's gonna be an adventure. Whether you're new here or we already know each other, aloha ko, and let's get started. Oh, and I'm gonna be discussing the history of bagels, so I sincerely apologize if I mispronounce any of the names that I'm gonna be listing. I promise I did my best to look up the pronunciations ahead of time. All right, so here I have most of my ingredients. We have 4.5 cups of all-purpose flour. It's supposed to be bread flour, but we didn't have any, so we'll see what happens. We have 1 teaspoon of kosher salt, 1 tablespoon of dry instant yeast, 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil, and 3 tablespoons of white sugar. All right, first step is to combine ingredients. Historians have puzzled over where, when, and how the bagel originated, but we don't seem to be able to pin down anything definite. That's unsurprising. We're dealing with centuries worth of intermittently documented history, after all. There are several noted candidates for bread inspirations that might have led to the development of the bagel, and their origins range from Italy to China. For instance, in China, the Uyghur people make a specific naan that's steamed before baking. They don't have a hole in the center, but they do have an indent deep enough to make the rings look very similar to bagels. There's limited evidence that this naan is actually related to bagels, let alone directly, but there's always a chance they have some connection. After all, naan reached China via the Silk Road. Why couldn't Uyghur naan and bagels have been connected somewhere along the way? Another similar bread is kek, a Middle Eastern treat sometimes known now as a Jerusalem sesame bagel. Recipes for it can be found in Arabic cookbooks throughout centuries, and those references chronicle the dough being shaped, boiled, and baked in that order. Kek is even referenced in the oldest Arabic cookbook on record, which dates back to the 10th century. There are a few contenders from Italy, the tarallo and the ciambella, as well as the buccellatum and the bracciatelle. Each is a ring of bread made in some similar fashion to the shape, boil, bake pattern we find in bagel recipes. There are variations in how and when these breads were eaten, particularly ciambella were depicted as luxury items, eaten by nobles as a treat, while buccellatum were a staple for Roman soldiers in the field. But according to the author of The Bagel, The Surprising History of a Modest Bread, the majority of the bagel's development, and its association specifically with Jewish people, took place in Poland. In Poland, they had the obwarjanek, which likely came about after Germany introduced the pretzel. Obwarjanki were made from wheat, which in Eastern Europe at the time was relatively pricey. They became a status symbol, only to be eaten at certain times or by certain people. And as the obwarjanek began to have its heyday, Jewish bakers in Poland started making very similar breads called bagele. Actually, it's the Yiddish word bagel that likely became, eventually, the word we use today. From there, the bagel has its own story. It found a home in the cultural mind of Poland, where it became part of local folklore and art. It was used by anti-Semitic rulers to bar Jewish people from Krakow, and it was used centuries later to call for an end to anti-Semitism before World War II began. Some of you might consider the bagel important particularly to the United States' Jewish culture, or even more specifically to New York City, and there's good reason for that. When Jewish people started moving en masse to the States in the 19th century, they brought with them all of their bread traditions, such as rye, challah, and yes, bagels. New York City was a major hub for immigrants, and many Jewish people settled there. They became just as much of the culture there as they had in Poland, if not more so. I mean, you can't tell an accurate history of New York without including the influence of Jewish people. Jewish bakers in New York were integral to the labor rights movements of the 1920s and 30s. Some were even referred to as model unionists because they were so effective at building and using labor unions to achieve better working conditions. They kept making bagels by hand and selling them well, during the 50s and 60s when other foods were increasingly homogenized by machinery. Bagels even had a heyday in the 70s when people said enough with the machines and wanted more handmade food again. Also in the 1970s, the Lender family made some expert choices that led to bagels being much easier to sell on supermarket shelves than they had been before. Murray Lender not only succeeded in pushing for fresh-made bagels to be frozen to retain their freshness, he also became arguably the most accomplished food marketer of the decade. And by 1984, he had sold his bagel company to Kraft Foods, where he and his family led the bagel division for years afterward. So why did I want to make them? See, my family is big on bagels. We've got some Jewish roots on my mother's side, and my grandparents grew up in New York City. I've been eating bagels with lox and capers for longer than I can remember, and we even have bagels every year during the holidays. Our immediate family celebrates a secular Christmas, and our tradition is to have a brunch centered around bagels. And since I like to bake, I thought it'd be a lot of fun to make something I've never tried to make before. I was really nervous, though, because I knew I'd hear about it if they weren't good. So all of them grew in the hot water. Now I have this giant tray of hot bagels ready to go in the oven. Well, check that out. They look like bagels, they smell like bagels, and I cannot wait to try them in the morning. Good morning. It is time to try my first bagel. One thing is the recipe called for parchment paper on the baking sheet, and we didn't have any that I found, so I used wax paper, which does not seem to have been up to the task because it's stuck to every single bagel. This is the first one I made, so it's the most wonky looking, and I'm gonna try it. Yeah, that's an untoasted bagel. So I don't know if I'd say it's a perfect bagel or anything, but at least check that out. When I open it up, it looks like it's got a good structure, it's got a nice soft inside, and it's definitely got that crunchy exterior. Well, I wouldn't say crunchy, but like most bagels aren't, at least in my experience, aren't crunchy without toasting, so I'm pretty happy. The bagels were great. I'd say they were a little dense, but they did have the right kind of crust and a soft interior. They toasted up really well, and I thought they distinctly tasted like bagels. Plus, I got some positive feedback from everyone who tried one, so I'm really excited to keep trying in the future. Maybe I'll get good at homemade bagels and start making them for our Christmas brunches. I just need to make sure I have parchment paper on hand instead of wax paper. That's all I've got this time, just a bit of fun and some history. If you liked this video, please give it a like and leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you're interested in seeing more content from me, and go check out my previous video on dealing with people seeing us differently than we see ourselves. If you'd like to read more about the history of the bagel, which I highly recommend you do, the resources I used while researching for this video are in the description, along with the recipe that I used to make the bagels. Have a wonderful day, and a hui ho!